All right, in today's video, we're bringing to you some coffee from Mexico that a friend of mine, Alvaro Carrasco, asked me to evaluate back in the summer. Alvaro, if you're watching this, my apologies. I told Alvaro that I was going to do this as soon as I could. Unfortunately, he sent it to me in the middle of our build for the roastery expansion, and so everything has just taken a lot longer, and everything kept getting pushed back, and so I'm only finally getting it now, right before Thanksgiving. My apologies, Alvaro. I will be sending this to you before the video comes out. And this is a coffee that Alvaro sent to me from Chiapas. And Chiapas is in the southern part of Mexico. It's typically a grape growing region. I believe that Alvaro has been getting into coffee production and export, and he asked me to do this, and I'm really honored to actually do this. He sent it in 2 bags. I believe they are the same coffee in the 2 bags. So there's only one label. But let's go over what we have here. It's a Chiapas coffee, black honey processed, typical varietal, grown at about 1,800 meters above sea level. This is lot number 1 of 3. It's Finca Carrasco. So he is growing his own coffee in Jitotol, Chiapas, Mexico. And fantastic. So he sent me this is a 1 pound sample. I guess he sent me 2 pounds. So we're going to go over, evaluate it, and give him our feedback on it. So let's get to it. Now that we have the coffee, we're going to need a workspace to evaluate the coffee. And so here we are. We've got our tabletop here. This is our grading table. It's a blacktop work surface that allows us to lay out the coffee in a way that we can see defects readily. So the black background helps the colors of the green coffee to pop, and also helps the defects or any defects that are left in the coffee stand out. So that's why we like to use blue surfaces. You can just get a like poster board if you don't want to build a countertop, or you can get any kind of black thing that will help pop that color. You can even use like an apron or like a black piece of cloth. So anything will work. Then the next thing we're going to need is our grading sheet. So this is the Spro Coffee unified grading sheet, and basically it allows us to capture all the pertinent details for every coffee that we evaluate. So this one has spaces for all the information necessary about the coffee, producer, coffee, the farm, location, the varietal, altitude, lot number, origin, everything like that. Then the next section is our green coffee section, and this section actually is where we evaluate the green coffee. We'll make all of our notes there, and then move on to roasting of the coffee. So we'll roast the coffee. We have a roast log that allows us to note the different temperatures of start and charge, as well as the end temperature and time, when the first crack happens, any kind of adjustments to the roast that we need to note. And then finally is the section on cupping. And that allows us, of course, to use the unified scoring sheet from the SCA, the Specialty Coffee Association, to finish the evaluation of the coffee. And that's pretty much it. And so that gives us an overview of any coffee that comes into our operations. So the first thing we're going to need to do is, we've got our cupping sheet, we've got our clipboard, we've got our aprons so we look professional. What we need is our pencils. You should always have some good pencils, and you want to sharpen them, right? I keep a sharpener on the desk here to try to keep them nice and sharp. A little bit more. Nice. And now that we have our coffee, we've got let's see what we got in the packaging. Alvaro was kind enough to send me this little card here. Hope you enjoy this coffee. Tell me what you think about it, for sure. Put that aside. We've got our coffee here. So we're going to take this information that the coffee's been provided, transfer that to our sheet here. Now it's going to be time to get into actually reviewing the green coffee and grading it and seeing how it is. So let's do it. Okay, now that we have our scale, we're going to measure out 350 grams of coffee. Why 350? Because that's the standardized sample size for evaluation of green coffee, as set by the SCA. At least it's set by the industry standards, right? Oops. The nice thing about Alvaro, he sent me a bunch of coffee, so a lot more than just needed for basic evaluation, which I really appreciate so that I'll have something nice to drink later. All right, 350 grams, perfect. Now that we've got the coffee all measured out, it's time to start grading. As you can see, here's the coffee. It's a pretty coffee. You can see that it's a little bit on the darker side, mainly because that's a byproduct of the black honey processing of the coffee. So if we look closely, you'll see some beans that have the silver skin on it that's kind of got this reddish, darker color to it. So that's actually part of all the pulp that's left on the coffee as it's drying, and it just kind of attaches itself and colors itself. So first thing we want to do is smell. And we're not necessarily looking for any particular kind of flavor. We want it to have no off flavors or no off aromas and be very clean smelling. Now this one does have a bit of like a fruitiness to it because it's a honey processed coffee, but there's no off flavors and it's very clean smelling. So that would just qualify as clean. So what we're looking for is foreign odors or clean, and this is clean. The next thing we want to do is evaluate the moisture content. Coffee that has not been properly dried will have a water content or moisture content higher than 12%. We want to see below 12%, ideally 10.5 to 11. Now, in order to do that, we're going to need this moisture analyzer. This is the Cynar 6095, and it's a great little moisture humidifier analyzer, and really simple to use. You basically just fill it and let it do its thing. All right, so let's do that. So we're going to just fill it straight to the top. Right to the very edge. Once that's done, we're going to put the cap on. Somehow. There we are. And screw it down pretty tight so that this indentation comes flush with the top. Like this. Then we're going to turn it on by hitting the button. And once it's ready to go, it says measure. Now it's measuring. Still going. Oh, this one says 12.5, 11.9. So we're talking a little bit high, 12.5. What we want to do is we want to test it at least 3 times to get the more of a average reading. 12.7, 13, 12.5, 12.3, 12.6. All right, we'll go one more time. 12.1. So after 6 readings, we're getting an average moisture humidity content of 12.1%, which I'm afraid is a little bit on the high side. So that's a little bit troubling. What's the concern with higher moisture content is really about aging, right? So for example, when your coffee has higher moisture contents, it can accelerate the deterioration of the coffee. And not just deterioration, like it's not going to break down and like start to ferment or create fungus or any kind of bacterial growth. It would have to have higher concentrations of moisture than that. This is the kind of thing we worry about where the coffee may not be as fresh as long, right? So it may not last as long. So if you like the coffee now when you taste it and it has a high moisture content, if you decide to buy that coffee, you only want to buy as much of that coffee as you can consume in a narrow window. So that's a little bit of a problem. So it could be that maybe there's a little bit of trouble in the way that they're drying, like maybe they weren't able to, they didn't dry it long enough. So we like to see it to be about, 10.5 to 11, maybe 11.5 at the very highest. That tends to give us the best shelf life for the coffee. Now there's a couple other areas we could check and evaluate, namely water activity and density of the coffee. Unfortunately, the equipment we have here at the roaster, we don't really have those devices here. The water activity meter can be quite expensive, and the meter for density is also kind of on the pricey side. So we haven't quite got those pieces of gear just yet. And most of the time with the coffees that we're receiving, I don't really necessarily worry too much about it because the moisture content is within the ideal range for what we're looking for. In this case, though, at 12.1 average moisture content, I wish we did have the water activity meter and density readings so that we could really get a little bit more detail into what may be going on. Okay, now that we've got the coffee weighed out, we're just going to take it and pull out some samples. Just a little bit like that is good. And then we're going to look through it to see if there are any defects in the coffee. Now, to help with that, we're going to use the Specialty Coffee Association's Arabica Green Coffee Defect Handbook. This will allow us to see the different types of, or see samples of the different types of defects that are not allowed for specialty coffee designation. And as you can see on the score, on the evaluation sheet here, we have both Category 1 and Category 2 defects. Category 1 defects are major defects that the presence of any of those, any one example in a 350-gram sample causes the coffee to be not designated as specialty. However, for each of the Category 2 defects, such as partial black, partial sour, parchment, floaters, immatures, withered shell, broken hull, and slight insect damage, those have different levels of allowable examples in the sample. And if I don't want to use the booklet as much, I also have the poster up on the wall that we can use as a quick reference. So the basic process in sorting is just to go through the coffee, looking for any kind of problems or defects. And the nice thing with having the black surface is that we can spread out the coffee pretty much and look for any kind of issues. Oops. Here, this is a good example. If you can see here, this particular seed, coffee bean, has some, silver skin that's coming off. It just looks not so nice, but there's nothing wrong with it. I just like to toss it around like this while looking for defects. Usually they come out, and so, wow, there's nothing in this one. That's nice. All right, let's push those aside. So the nice thing, if you have a bigger work surface, it just allows you, it's a little bit easier to work with. Like here I have a whole countertop and it's about 5 feet long, which is very helpful. The nice thing, you can also smell the aromatics from the coffee as I'm tossing it around, and it's really got a nice, fresh, clean, and sweet aroma. Okay, so here's one. This is a broken. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this broken and put that in our little category sheet. Now over here in the corner I have this grading aid that we have, and I'm going to take this broken and I'm going to put that here. And this is just a sheet that allows me to separate out any of the problematic coffees and use that later for final evaluation. So we're continuing on. Here's another. This looks more like insect damage. So put that in the slight insect. This one is just a little bit oddly formed. One of the things we try to instill into people that we work with and that are teaching or that are learning coffee grading is you don't want to be too harsh. Like sometimes they're just ugly and there's no penalty for ugly. Like this one's a little bit of an odd shape. More like a wedge. I mean, right now we're going through it pretty quickly, and I have to say this coffee is really quite nice. Very well sorted. Now here's the reality is that coffee doesn't naturally come out like this. Like there's always a lot more defects and problems, usually in the coffee somewhere along the way. This is also a result of proper sorting. So Alvaro has taken a really meticulous time to sort the coffee really well, pull out any defects before, any kind of problem coffees before they actually ship it. This one's just another one that's kind of maybe ugly, but not, I wouldn't say that's anything wrong with it. Remarkably clean, remarkably clean. And I work with a lot of clean coffees. Here's one, a little bit of damage. Looks like insect damage to me. So we're going to put that here, slight insect. There's two examples. One more, little batch. Again, this coffee is super clean. I'm really impressed. I'm actually impressed by this. All right, the last batch of our sample. Now, depending on who we were working with at the time, you know, I've had some coffees that we've had in here that were lots and lots of brokens and other, you know, secondary defects. A lot of times we'll see those kind of problems, especially in large quantities, with growers that we're working with to help them troubleshoot, to help them figure out how their coffee's doing, what kind of improvements in their processes they can make, or that they need to make. You know, I remember one of the growers we were working with several years ago, they had like a total secondary defect count of over 130 in a 350 gram sample. So there was a lot of mostly damage from the dry milling. So there was some things they had to do to pay attention to at the dry milling stage, and but you know, they sorted that all out, and now the coffee is just beautiful. All right, this one, my goodness, yeah, that's it. That's good. Huh. All right, let's have a look here. We've got our defect count. We've got one broken. Now you can see here the number 5. This is the number of maximum allowable secondary defects or broken defects before it's considered to be one whole secondary defect, meaning that you can have 4 of these brokens and it will not be considered a defect. In this one, slight insect damage has a allowable number of 10. Once you reach 10, that's equivalent to a full defect. Okay, so we've got our results now, and we've got 4 secondary defect examples. For example, we have 4 examples of secondary defects. Because those are below the threshold for a full secondary defect, in effect we have 0 secondary defects and 0 category 1 defects. So the coffee is perfectly fine, very clean, very smooth, very defect free. You know, it's to the point of saying it would be 0 defect coffee. So we would designate this a specialty grade coffee. So the next step is to roast the coffee. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a 150-gram sample, roast that up, and then cup it to finish our evaluation of the coffee and see what we think about it, and then send the results to Alvaro. So that's actually going to happen in part 2 on the Spro Coffee channel. It's going to continue there. So you're watching right now on the Ono Coffee channel. Watch the second part. It's live right now on Spro Coffee here on YouTube. Down below. And yeah, see you there.